When the night shift becomes your worst nightmare, they say nothing good happens after midnight. Working the graveyard shift, you learn that's not just a saying, it's a warning. These are the stories that keep night workers awake long after their shifts end. The encounters that make you question whether that rustling sound is just the wind or something far more sinister waiting in the shadows. The hotel guest who never checked. The credit card beeped like it went through. I handed him the key to room 214, watched him disappear into the elevator, and went back to scrolling through my phone. Just another late check-in at our quiet little hotel. But 4 hours later, when the police dragged him out in handcuffs, I realized he was never supposed to be there at all. I used to work the night shift at a small 3-story hotel, maybe 40 rooms total, usually dead quiet after midnight. Perfect for someone like me who preferred the peaceful solitude of empty hallways and the occasional late arrival. The lobby was compact, just my desk, some couches with a TV, and vending machines humming in the corner. Behind the desk sat a little office with a computer and a glass window, so I could monitor the lobby while doing paperwork or, honestly, watching YouTube when things got really slow. The automatic door locks kicked in at night, so guests had to buzz for entry. That's how he got in around 11 p.m., pressed the buzzer like any normal guest. Mid-40s, tall and lean, wearing jeans and a baseball cap with a backpack slung over his shoulder. Nothing screamed danger, but something felt off about the way he lingered at the desk after I handed him his key card. His eyes stayed locked on mine for 3, maybe 4 seconds too long. Not quite threatening, but enough to make me notice. After he left for the elevator, I settled back into my routine. Phone, paperwork, the usual midnight monotony. Around 12:30, I glanced up to see him back in the lobby. He hadn't approached the desk, just walked past me and planted himself on one of the couches facing the dark TV screen. Some guests can't sleep, I figured. They wander down to kill time. No big deal, but 30 minutes passed and he hadn't moved. Not scrolling his phone, not reading, not even nodding off. Just sitting perfectly still, staring at the blank screen like it was playing the most fascinating movie ever made. When I got up to grab water from the vending machine, I felt his head turn to track my movement across the lobby. Not a casual glance, a deliberate, sustained watch that followed me there and back. That uneasy feeling in my chest started to grow. At 1 a.m., bored and trying to shake off the weird vibes, I pulled up our reservation system, routine check of occupied rooms, transaction logs, the usual administrative busy work. That's when I saw it, room 214 showed vacant. I stared at the screen, confused. I'd literally checked this guy in an hour ago. Maybe I'd made a mistake with the room number. I pulled up the check-in logs. Nothing. No name, no charge, no record of any transaction. Then the payment screen. No credit card charges for the entire evening. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remembered his card beeping when I swiped it. The little electronic confirmation that everything went through. I called room 214. 10 rings. No answer. The key card entry log told the real story. No one had entered that room all night. He'd never even gone upstairs after I gave him the key. I looked over at the lounge area where he still sat motionless, and a cold dread settled in my bones. Something was very, very wrong. For 15 minutes I sat there debating what to do. The system could have glitched, but 3 separate logs showing no trace of him? That was more than a glitch. At 1:30 I forced myself to walk over and ask if everything was okay. He turned to face me with that same blank expression. "Just can't sleep," he said in a flat monotone, then immediately swiveled back to the dead TV. I nodded and retreated to my desk, hands trembling. By 2 a.m. he'd moved again. This time I couldn't see him anywhere in the lobby, and panic shot through me. I scanned the area frantically until I spotted him standing at the end of the hallway by the bathrooms, half hidden in shadow. Just standing there, motionless, watching. I pretended to work on the computer while sneaking glances at him. He stood there for several minutes, then slowly, deliberately, walked back to the lounge like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone when I called my manager. "Keep an eye on him," she said, groggy and dismissive. "Call the police if he does anything threatening." It already felt threatening, but I didn't know how to explain that to someone who wasn't there, wasn't feeling the weight of his constant stare. I checked the security cameras after hanging up. The footage showed him wandering the first-floor hallway, walking to the dead end, standing there for several minutes, then returning. Later, he disappeared into the stairwell for 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was doing in there. Every time I looked up from my screen, he'd relocated, near the vending machines by the elevators, lurking in the poorly lit corner of the lobby. Always watching. Always staring. By 3:30, my nerves were completely shot. I called the non-emergency police line and explained that a man in the hotel wasn't actually a guest. They promised to send someone. While waiting, he moved closer to the desk, maybe 15 feet away, and just stood there staring at me. He barely blinked. Didn't speak. The intensity of his gaze made my skin crawl and my breathing shallow. I typed meaningless words on the keyboard, pretending to be busy while terror crept up my spine. At 3:50, the buzzer rang. I thought it might be the police, but it was just another guest returning late. As I let him in, I noticed the strange man's head swivel to track the guest's entire path across the lobby. He was studying the guest's movements, memorizing his route. That's when true fear kicked in. This wasn't just about me anymore. Minutes later, he vanished again. The security cameras showed him standing outside a guest room door on the first floor. Not knocking, not trying the handle. Just standing there like a predator sizing up prey. I called 911. There's a man standing outside a guest room and I don't know what he's planning to do. I whispered into the phone. They assured me officers were en route. For 3 agonizing minutes, he remained motionless outside that door. Then he slowly walked back to the lobby, approached my desk and leaned over the counter. His voice was so low it barely registered as human when he asked, "Is there any food?" "Vending machines," I managed to croak, pointing to the corner. He smiled, a small, cold expression that made my blood freeze, then walked away. I stared at the clock, willing the police to arrive. At 4:10, 2 officers finally entered. I pointed directly at him, still sitting in the lounge like he owned the place. They approached, asked for identification, questioned him quietly. Then they escorted him out. One officer returned with the explanation that shattered my understanding of the night. The man wasn't a guest at all. The credit card was stolen. He had no reservation, no luggage, nothing. He'd been faking everything to gain access to the building. They arrested him for trespassing and credit card fraud. After they left, I sat there shaking until my shift ended at 6 a.m. Every glance at the security monitors made me expect to see him again, standing in some corner, watching. The part that haunts me most is realizing he'd spent hours inside the hotel, wandering the halls, standing outside guest rooms, positioning himself in different spots to observe me, when he was never supposed to be there at all. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. That was the most terrifying night of my life. The gas station regular who knew too much. "You always work this late." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact from a man I'd never seen before, standing in my empty gas station at 1 a.m. on a Thursday night, staring at me like he'd been studying me for months. "My name is Meredith, and I work the night shift at a tiny gas station off County Road 11. It's the kind of place most people don't notice unless they're desperate for gas or completely lost. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable, just me, the humming fluorescent lights and the occasional insomniac buying energy drinks. I liked the solitude, or at least I used to. The man who walked in that Thursday night changed everything. Mid-40s, maybe older, wearing a green coat with messy hair and lips so dry they looked like they'd forgotten how to smile. While most customers head straight for coffee or snacks, he just stood near the counter, staring at me with unsettling familiarity. "Hi," I said, forcing politeness into my voice. "You always work this late," he replied. Yeah, mostly," I managed. His smile was wrong, too knowing, too intimate. I figured. "I've passed through a few times. Noticed it's always you." My stomach tightened. "Oh yeah, right. Small town, he didn't leave. Meredith, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. My throat felt tight as I started to ask how he knew my name. But he continued before I could speak. "You have nice handwriting," he said, gesturing toward the whiteboard where I'd written "Cinnamon Coffee is back." "Most people dot their I's like circles. You use little slashes. Very specific, thoughtful." The way he said thoughtful made my skin crawl. I couldn't respond. He stood there for another minute, watching me like he was cataloging my reactions, studying how I breathed when nervous, how I shifted my weight when uncomfortable. Finally, he nodded. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." Then he walked out into the fog without buying anything. That's when the visits started. Not every night, never predictable enough to call the police about, but regular enough that I stopped believing in coincidence. Sometimes he'd come inside and linger. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car at the edge of the parking lot with his headlights off, a dark silhouette I could feel watching me through the windows. One night, I tried ignoring him. He bought a bottle of water and lingered like always, but this time I kept my responses short. My eyes down. "You're quieter tonight," he observed. "Long shift," I muttered. He looked around the store slowly like he was taking inventory. "It must get lonely. Just you out here in the dark. No one else for miles." "I'm fine." He leaned on the counter, bringing his face closer to mine. "You ever get scared being a woman alone at night?" His voice wasn't threatening, that's what made it so much worse. It was curious, neutral, like he was asking about the weather while my every instinct screamed danger. "Do you need anything else?" I stepped back. He tilted his head, considering. "You always keep the door to the back room locked. Smart. I noticed you check it around 2 a.m. almost every night." My blood turned to ice. How long had he been watching? How many nights had I been unknowingly performing for an audience of one? "I'll let you get back to it," he said with that same soft, apologetic smile. "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then he walked out, leaving me shaking behind the counter. After that night, I started walking to my car with keys between my fingers. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment and started locking the bathroom door even when I was alone. The hypervigilance was exhausting but necessary. There were nights he didn't come, sometimes whole weeks would pass. But those absences made it worse. I never knew when he'd reappear, never knew when I'd look up to see his car lurking at the edge of the lot or his silhouette filling the doorway. The Polaroid was the breaking point. I returned from a 10-minute break to find it lying on the counter. A photo of me refilling the windshield washer bin behind the station. The picture was recent, taken that very night, and shot from close range. Too close. Someone had been standing just feet away while I worked. Close enough to capture the concentrated expression on my face. Close enough to hear me humming under my breath. There was no note, but the word windshield on the bin label had been circled in red ink, along with the slash dot over the letter I, my signature that he'd noticed from the very beginning. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. My voice cracked when I said I'd call the police if he stayed, and I hated showing that weakness. Paul just nodded calmly. "I get it. I've been too forward." "You've been following me," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "I just think you're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood. I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who pays attention." "That's not paying attention. That's obsession." He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I came in with a smile and bought a soda every night? Would I be more normal if I talked about sports and pretended I didn't notice the way your shoes are always a half size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired?" I was already dialing 911 by then. He didn't stop me, didn't run, didn't even seem concerned. He just stood there with his arms at his sides, waiting. When the police arrived, he didn't resist. They searched his car and found a notepad filled with dates, times, and observations. My schedule, notes about my habits, my clothes, my mannerisms. One page contained just my name written over and over in tighter and tighter loops until it devolved into frantic scribbles. He kept telling the officers the same thing. "I just noticed things. I'm just a curious guy." The restraining order went through that week. The company transferred me to another station 2 hours away, and I don't work nights anymore. But even now, when I see headlights following me too long on dark roads, the back of my neck tingles with familiar dread. Sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, like he'd been practicing it, like he already knew how it would feel in his mouth. That's the part that haunts me most. Not just that he was watching, but that he was savoring every detail, collecting pieces of my life like trophies. Some people pay attention. Others consume you piece by piece until nothing feels safe anymore. The mysterious cars and missing license plates, 2 brand new cars with no license plates, a pile of blankets in the back seat, and men who pretended not to speak English until confronted. Some coincidences are too calculated to be coincidences at all. I'm 22, and I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station, covering weekends Thursday through Saturday. Last night started like any other. Quiet roads, empty pumps, and the familiar hum of fluorescent lights keeping me company. Then my coworker Max and his friend Ben showed up around 2:30 a.m., high as kites on magic mushrooms and giggling like teenagers. Their visit should have been pure entertainment, watching two grown men fascinated by a bag of Skittles, but Ben's casual comment changed everything. "There's a car in the parking lot with its lights off but the engine running," he said, still grinning from his chemical adventure. "Guy inside says he's waiting for a DoorDash order." That's when my stomach dropped. I hadn't received a DoorDash order in almost 2 hours. I'd spent most of the night in the back of the store cleaning, away from the registers and front windows, completely unable to see the parking lot. We brushed it off initially, but once Max and Ben went outside to smoke and play with Max's dog, that nagging feeling started to grow. An hour later, they returned for more coffee, and Max's expression had changed. The mushrooms were still in his system, but his eyes held a new sharpness. "That car's been out there the whole time," he said. "Parked in a spot where you can't see it from the register because of the wall. The entire hour we were playing in the lot, the guy kept switching between watching us and texting on his phone." Ben, still high but now alert, had approached the car to ask what was up. When I got close and asked why he was looking at us, the guy tried to pretend he didn't speak English. When that didn't work, he switched to English and said he must have had the wrong address before peeling out of here. But here's where it gets truly unsettling. Max noticed the car looked brand new and had no license plates. More concerning, there was a pile of blankets in the back seat, enough to hide someone underneath. And when the first car was confronted and fled, another vehicle had pulled into the lot with its lights off, also brand new, also missing license plates. As soon as the first car left, the second one immediately followed. Max stayed another 15 minutes before heading out, but he came back at 6 a.m., completely sober this time, to check on me. The mushrooms had worn off, but his concern hadn't. "The guy was acting super suspicious the entire time we were out there," he said, constantly checking his phone, watching us, monitoring the entrance to the lot and the store doors. Even high, I knew something was wrong. We both realized that if Max and Ben hadn't been there playing like kids in the parking lot, this scenario could have gone very differently. I carry a knife for protection, but from their description, if there were multiple people involved, it might not have been enough. The thought that kept haunting me: was it pure coincidence? Or were those cars waiting for Max and Ben to leave so they could approach me alone? Unfortunately, I got my answer the next night. It was about 3 a.m. and I was mopping floors when 4 guys came in for coffee and snacks. As I rang them up, one asked if I knew anything about the car at the far end of the parking lot, running with its lights off. My heart sank. "What car?" He described a brand new Subaru with no license plates and 2 guys arguing in the front seats. The same description from the night before, but this time with 2 occupants instead of 1. I told them about the previous night's incident, and their leader's expression grew serious. We noticed the car when we pulled in to get gas. It was just sitting there while we filled up. As we walked to the door, we passed close enough to hear one guy talking loud and pointing toward the store entrance. When they'd approached to ask if everything was okay, the men in the car panicked, threw it in reverse, and sped away. These 4 customers, complete strangers, were alarmed enough to offer to stay with me for a while. They hung around for 20 minutes, let me top off their coffee for free, and only left when we were all convinced I was probably safe. Nothing else happened that shift, but I kept thinking about what I'd learned. Not once had I actually seen these suspicious cars myself. Both nights, other people had warned me about them. Both times, the vehicles were positioned where I couldn't see them from inside the store. Both times they fled when confronted. That's not random behavior. That's surveillance. The scariest part isn't what happened, it's what might have happened if I'd been alone both nights. If Max and Ben hadn't shown up high and playful, making noise in the parking lot. If those 4 customers hadn't arrived exactly when they did. Some guardian angels come in unexpected forms. Mushroom-addled friends and late-night coffee runs by strangers who notice what you can't see and care enough to stick around until you're safe. I don't work for the next few days, and I can only hope when I return, those license plateless cars have found someone else to watch. The bell that rang by itself, working alone in an empty motel at 2 a.m. You learn to distinguish between the normal sounds, creaking walls, clicking heaters, buzzing door locks, and the sounds that don't belong. But when a pale hand reaches up from under your desk to ring the service bell right in front of you, Every sound becomes a threat. My name is Daniel, I'm 29, and I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It's not a chain, just a family-owned place with 2 floors and maybe 25 rooms total. The 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift suits me perfectly. I'm not much for people, and most nights the building sits empty and quiet, exactly how I like it. The setup is simple. A main office with the front desk, some guest chairs, a coffee machine, and a rack of local brochures. Behind the desk, a hallway leads to a back office that functions as my personal lounge. Another desk, a couch, mini fridge, and a wall-mounted TV. A small speaker in the back dings whenever someone rings the service bell at the front desk, so I can relax in the lounge and only emerge when needed. After working there long enough, you memorize the building's rhythm. The structure creaks as it settles. The heater clicks on and off. Guest keycards make the front door buzz after hours. All normal sounds that become white noise after a while, but sometimes the things that seem normal turn out to be anything but. This happened on a Tuesday night in fall. Cold outside, maybe 40 degrees, with a parking lot containing only 4 or 5 cars from registered guests. It was about 2 a.m. when I first heard the bell. I got up from the couch in the back office and walked to the front desk, but nobody was there. The lobby was empty. I looked through the glass doors at the dark, empty road beyond. No cars pulling in, no headlights, no movement at all. The bell is loud and distinct, so I knew I hadn't imagined it. I stood there for a minute waiting for a late arrival, but no one appeared. Back to the lounge I went, settling on the couch with my phone. Less than 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. I hurried to the front office, but once again found it empty. This time the hair on my neck stood up. I stepped outside and walked the parking lot, looking for any sign of movement. The guest cars sat dark and silent. The road was completely deserted. Nothing. I returned inside and positioned myself behind the front desk instead of retreating to the back. Maybe some drunk was playing games, a twisted version of Ding Dong Ditch. After 15 minutes of nothing, I started to relax and opened my laptop. Then the bell rang a third time. My head snapped up so fast it hurt. Still empty. Nobody visible anywhere. My skin began to crawl as I searched the bathrooms, checked around the desk, even went outside again with my phone's flashlight. Nothing. This time I decided to be strategic. Instead of going back to the lounge, I dimmed the lobby lights and sat directly behind the front desk, determined to catch whoever was messing with me. The silence felt oppressive. Every clock tick, every building creak, every hum from the back office fridge seemed amplified. I stared at that service bell for 15 minutes, then 20. My eyelids grew heavy. Maybe whoever it was had given up. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Just as I started to doze off, it happened again. The bell rang, but this time I saw what was doing it. A pale hand reached up from under the front desk, stretched over the counter, and pressed the bell directly in front of me. I launched out of that chair so fast I nearly knocked it over and sprinted down the hallway to the back office, slamming and locking the door behind me. My chest was pounding, my mind racing to process what I'd just witnessed. Someone had been hiding under that desk the entire time, crouched in that small space while I sat just feet away, waiting, listening to me breathe, watching my feet, planning the perfect moment to reveal themselves. I forced myself to check the security monitors. 4 cameras covered the lobby, hallway, and parking lot. On the lobby feed, I could see my overturned chair. The counter looked empty at first glance. Then, in the bottom corner of the frame, movement. A head poked out from behind the desk. I couldn't make out details, just the outline and the glint of eyes staring directly into the camera lens. I backed away from the monitor, unable to look. With shaking hands, I dialed 911 and whispered that someone had broken in and was hiding in the lobby. While on the phone with dispatch, I watched the person crawl out from behind the desk on hands and knees, then stand up. Tall, wearing a hoodie pulled tight, posture hunched. He turned and began wandering the lobby like he was looking for something, then disappeared from the camera frame toward the hallway that led to my hiding spot. The door handle rattled once, slow, deliberate, then nothing. I pressed my back against the locked door, throat closing with fear. Eventually, I heard footsteps moving away and rushed back to the monitor. The intruder was pacing the lobby again, at one point standing before the glass entrance doors like he was waiting for someone. Then he moved to the brochure rack and casually flipped through papers, killing time like a patient predator. When I finally saw police lights flashing through the parking lot cameras, The man bolted out of frame immediately. By the time officers cleared the building, he was gone. They found a rock near the front door that had presumably propped it open, but no sign of the intruder. The officer explained that whoever it was had slipped out as soon as they arrived, but I keep replaying that moment, the pale hand reaching up from under the desk to ring the bell. So calm, so deliberate. He'd been there the whole time, just waiting for the right moment to let me know I wasn't alone. Now every time I hear that bell at night, I see that hand. I don't think I'll ever look at that desk the same way again.